Rachel Campbell. Welcome to episode 1 of Pedagogy Palooza. This week we are welcoming Professor Tony Eaton, Associate Dean of Education in the Faculty of Arts and Design. Tony, welcome to today's podcast.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to be talking everything SoTl or SALT, depending on which version of the acronym you like. But I thought it might be useful to start off with what the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning is and why it's important.
Okay, as to what it is, it's just good teaching practice. It's thinking about what you do, thinking about how to make it better, and thinking about it from a sort of a student's point of view, what you can do to improve things for your students, which is what most of us are doing most of the time anyway.
If we can, I guess, highlight maybe for a moment the scholarship part of things, there's fantastic best practice research out there, right?
Oh, there is so much stuff out there. The hard bit for me is picking exactly what you want to do, because there are so many ways you can take your teaching. There are so many ways you can improve your teaching, no matter how long you've been doing it for, no matter how many years you've been in the classroom or the tutorial room or the lecture theatre. For me as a teacher, it's part of the thing I love the most is taking something I might have been teaching for 15 years in some horrible cases, and working out how I can make it interesting again, make it more fun, make it more up-to-date, more relevant to the sort of the changing student body. That for me is what I love most about teaching. And so SoTl is exactly that. It's that process. It's just quantifying it somewhat.
And reflecting too, right? That's such a big part of what the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning is saying, this is what I did. Did it work? What
can I build on? Many decades ago when I did my first teaching qualification, the very first thing I remember them teaching us on day one is, actually the first thing they taught us was don't panic, and if you must panic, panic slowly, which is advice I still treasure to this day.
Yep.
The second thing they taught us was don't stop thinking about what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Don't park yourself. Remember a relative of mine once telling me a story, apocryphal admittedly, about a university lecturer they knew who had an old-fashioned filing cabinet in their office, and for any given lecture of the year they could go to this filing cabinet and pull out the notes, and they'd been doing that for like 20 years. And I remember at the time listening to this story and thinking, oh God, I hope that's never me.
That's wild, isn't it, really?
It is. It happens.
And you mentioned coming at it from the student experience. Our students, in a way, are our masters. You know, we're teaching in response to them. We've got a hugely changing cohort. They've lived through a pandemic, as have we, and that's really changed the landscape, I think, of higher education.
Yeah, I think we're still wrestling with so much of this stuff. I feel like, yes, we've seen a huge change in our student cohort in the last 5 years. Not necessarily a bad change. I want to be really clear about that too. But certainly our current crop of students are dealing with a whole lot of things that I certainly never had to deal with as an undergraduate or even as a postgraduate. Part of the importance of SoTl is that it is one mechanism by which we as teachers can be aware of that and work to sort of make our students' lives just that little bit better.
Why is it important? Because we've got colleagues, I mean, all of us, we've got to answer to the SoTl gods in our PDPs and things like that. So there's a really concrete part of this, isn't there, that it's a box we need to tick at the very least?
Yeah, look, there's a really pragmatic dimension to this, even if it's not something that, you know, if you're sitting out there rolling your eyes at the thought of SoTl.
I can't imagine everyone's not as passionate about it as we are, Tony.
I think most of our colleagues are. Certainly
Actually,
in our
I think
faculty,
you're right. Yeah.
I struggle to think of anyone who I would say is, you know, that I work with who I would say is disinterested in their teaching. There is an absolutely pragmatic dimension, which is this is a professional development requirement. It's, you know, anyone who's done their PDP in the last 12 months has seen a little box appear there and probably did exactly what I did and heaved a massive big sigh and rolled their eyes and said, oh God, it's one more thing I've got to fill out. What the hell is this? What can I, you know, put in this box? And that's what this whole process is, you know, Pedagogy Palooza is all about. It's this year you'll be able to write, you know, at least I listened to the podcasts.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's, you know, but there is that practical box that needs to be ticked there. There's, if you're thinking of going for a promotion, it's going to be one of the things that promotion committees are looking at.
So to, I guess, foreshadow that sounds ominous, but to foreshadow what we've got planned is we've got our series of 3 podcasts. So, Tony, of course, you're our first guest.
Hi.
In episode 2, we'll be glad to welcome the Pro Vice Chancellor of Education, Professor Tanya Broadley. And then in episode 3, Dr Rob Gray, who's a SoTl expert from Learning and Teaching. But then we're culminating with the Learning and Teaching Roadshow, which is going to be in Class-Free Week. And one of the things I know that they're going to be introducing to us is Cadmus as a SoTl activity, as which is this new end-to-end fancy assessment platform, which I'm deep in.
Which you're using this semester.
Yes, I am.
So Rachel has ticked her SoTl box.
I was like, I'll just do it. And actually, I'm finding it really excellent. I was really tickled to see how easy it was to use and how beautiful it is. And it's got so many great applications, not just for identifying academic misconduct, but also to bring that equity lens. We can actually see problems before they are occurring, so it can be proactive.
Now, I know Cadmus came on my radar late last year and I had no clue what it actually was. Maybe I suspect I'm no orphan there. Do you want to give a very quick potted 2-minute version?
What I can make out is it's like a Google Doc where students will do their assignment into the Cadmus platform, but it's got all this functionality. So we can see these insights like who started it, how many minutes they've worked on it. We can see how much they've copied and pasted, how much they've paraphrased, but also from a student perspective, if they copy and paste more than 30 words, a little thing will pop up. A bit like that old-fashioned paperclip in Microsoft Word, and it'll say,
everybody loved that.
Yeah,
just so much.
It'll say, "Hey, you've copied and pasted a big thing. Like, do you want to paraphrase it?" And it's got inbuilt things to help them with referencing. I think one of the biggest parts of it that will be excellent for us is those insights as to how much time they're spending and all that kind of thing. But it's this kind of self-contained platform.
Right, so it's sort of a word processing
kind
on
of
steroids.
If you can imagine a word processing, browser-based thing that crosses with Canvas, it crosses with SpeedGrader. You can have all your resources embedded in there so you know if they've clicked on them. So, for instance, if you've set a reading that they have to respond to, you can link it as a resource, linking back to the reading list, of course, so we're meeting our copyright obligations.
Very important.
Very important. So you can have that in there and it will tell you which students have or have not clicked on it. So if they haven't clicked on a resource and they've copied and pasted almost their whole thing, maybe you could say, hey, let's have a chat about your work. But conversely, if they've clicked on the link 40 times and they've spent 5 hours on an assignment that's worth, 10%, you might be able to identify that student needs a little bit more support. So it can be proactive in that way as well. So look, I'm new. I've only just drunk a little bit of the Kool-Aid on the Cadmus, but so far so good.
So to circle this back to SoTl then.
Please.
Do you think it's changing your teaching practice already?
I think for me...
He says on day 1 of week 1.
I like how you believe big things of me, Tony. For me, it's kind of cemented some things that I knew I was doing well. So it helps you to scaffold assessments in a really good way. They've got a lot of templates that you can use. So I think for our colleagues who aren't as confident in designing assessments, it's going to be a big help because it's going to step you through that process of scaffolding. It's going to scaffold the scaffolding. But for me, I could sort of look at those templates and go, you know what, my assessments are in really good shape and they do follow that format. So for me, I guess it cemented some of those things. I guess it will remain to see. Once we see those insights coming through, I'll know if it's going well. But I'm quietly confident that it's going to be a bit of a game changer, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good to hear because in terms of what we're talking about, the scholarship of learning and teaching, or teaching and learning, depending, a big part of it's not just the, learning new skills, learning what you're doing wrong. It's also realizing what you're doing right and the stuff that you can build on. And we all do that. And this sounds like a great tool for... That's
right. And I think too, from a SoTl perspective, it's also about sometimes we intuitively do things that we think are the right things to do. And often they are, sometimes they're not, but often they are. And I think for me, sometimes when I've gone looking for research to back up my practice, that sort of research has backed up that intuitive kind of educating that I do anyway, because I do think for the scholarship of teaching and learning, that word scholarship is really key, and having some of that evidence to back up what we're doing is also really, really important.
Yeah, that's a great, I think that's really the point of departure. When I say we are doing this already, it's the scholarship bit, the evidentiary bit that a lot of us don't do, that we do very intuitively and constantly. but only really think about when we have to do that annual PDP or a promotion application or something along those lines. And that's probably where the shift is that there is a lot more, I guess, conscious awareness of it.
Do you have any top tips for, I guess, straightforward, quick, easy ways to incorporate the scholarship of teaching and learning if this is something that is new to people, maybe outside that sort of PDP process? Because that's what we want to do, right? Is we want to embed it into
our practice.
Or be more conscious of it in our practice.
The first top tip I would say is talk to your colleagues. Just discuss your teaching, discuss your Canvas sites, just talk about what you're doing, what's working and what's not working. Grab the opportunities that you get to talk at school meetings, at Canvas roadshows or the Week 8 roadshow that we're going to run. Just talking about your practice is reflecting on it. And people in our faculty doing amazing stuff with their Canvas sites, with their unit outlines, with their assessment structures and procedures. There's some really edgy, groundbreaking things going on in FAD. Some of our units are just amazing in the way they operate and the way that they are structured. And we don't often know what's going on. This is one of the things I've been amazed as ADE, which I've only been doing for 6 months, is just, I thought I was pretty switched on and connected to what was happening in the faculty and the university, but there are so many incredible things going on that we're just not aware of. So talk to your colleagues from across the faculties, across the schools, across the university, because just that one simple act on its own starts you thinking and starts you reflecting, and then everything else can kind of follow from that.
Yeah,
that would be my top tip.
That's such a great one too, because as you say, when you talk through something with a colleague, that is, you are reflecting on it and often refining it. But I just thought then, do you think that staff or our educators are afraid to share what they're doing? Like, I'll add anyone to my Canvas site. So I'm like I'm like the Statue of Liberty when it comes to my Canvas sites. Everyone's welcome. But I'm just wondering if that's something that we haven't been as sort of ready to share. Do you think there's an element of fear there or something? I feel like there might be a block,
It can feel like you're being judged.
It's a vulnerable place to be, I think.
Is.
I think that's an easy one to implement in a lot of ways. I was just having a conversation with a colleague this morning about modelling excellence. And for me, this comes out of my practice as a music teacher, is that if you model excellence in your own as a musician to your students, they will often mirror that back to you and you don't even have to say anything. So for me, the reason that I like my Canvas sites to be like super snazzy is that I feel like it's modelling excellence to students so that I can show them that I've got pride in what I do, and hopefully they'll echo that back to me. And you don't have to talk about excellence then, because you're showing them that you're doing it, and having that sort of pride in your learning environment. Because, in olden days, we might have a lecture hall with, that's got a certain vibe to it, books on the walls or whatever, or we're wearing our robes, in the olden days.
That's very olden days.
I know some people who do it now. It's an interesting thing. But, or, as classroom teachers, we might decorate our classroom to have a really warm learning environment. We don't do that. We don't have physically warm learning environments now, but I think we can have virtually warm and inviting and clear and, glorious learning environments. I see that as quite important.
Look, when I started teaching high school in, God knows, 1990 something, let's not go any further back than that. I remember the first thing I got to do as a young 23-year-old newly employed teacher was I was given my classroom, and I went in there and I spent an entire weekend sticking stuff up and decorating and making it that warm learning environment. We don't have that in the university sector, and so Canvas is as close as that online learning environment is really crucial.
That's right. That's where we intersect, and I'm so conscious too when we publish sites that on the first day of O Week, before we've met our students, they've actually met us through our work.
Yep.
And so for me, that's that's really profound for me. Is the first connection that they make with us is through those sites.
It's through that front page of what they see.
That's right. Yeah. So for me, it is important. If I could just maybe summarize some of the things you said, because I think we've had a wide-ranging discussion. Top tip for SoTl from Tony. That's got a nice ring to it. Talking to colleagues. We talked about why it's important to engage with these SoTl activities is for our promotions, our PDPs, but also to become, the best that we can be in an education sense. Tony, thanks so much for joining us. I think we've covered some really interesting things, which I think our colleagues will find fascinating and super helpful. Next time on Pedagogy Palooza, we'll be welcoming Professor Tanya Broadley, Pro-Vice Chancellor of Education at the University of Canberra. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss any episodes of Pedagogy Palooza. Thanks for listening.